already 7 minutes in and I'm so angry at the study. I forgot how angry this study makes me. Hey everyone, Ray here, and today I would like to talk about a study, and I have chosen this study because not only am I an ex-psychology student, but I am also autistic and know a lot of autistic people, so this study kind of came to heart. However, the study I read back in December, and I also have executive dysfunction, and we love her because now it's February and I'm only just talking about this study. At the time back in December, it was a very popular topic amongst the autistic community. I was seeing it pop up everywhere and I knew I wanted to talk about it, and now I'm finally doing it. And I wanted to talk about it not only as someone who's autistic, but also as someone who has studied psychology and can talk about why this study was so useless and unnecessary to do. Back in 1920, a similar study was conducted where a little boy was made to feel frightened, and it is so well known today because of how unethical it is. Yet 100 years later, Yale University managed to do a similar study on autistic toddlers. So in the 1920s, Watson and Rayner did a study on a little boy called Little Albert, and it was in response to Pavlov's study, and he wanted to see if fear could be a conditioned response. Little Albert himself was 9 months old when the experiment began. He was shown a neutral stimuli, the main one being a white rat, and then would hit a steel bar behind Albert's head, causing him to be frightened and cry. This was done again at 11 months, where 2 studies happened over 1 week. And each time when little Albert would see the rat, the steel bar would be hit behind his head to frighten him. This not only made him terrified of rats, but also anything white or fluffy, including his family pet, Santa Claus, and fur coats. But can we just imagine a little kid being made to be frightened of not only his family dog, but of Santa? Why was this allowed? That's all I'm still shocked by some studies that were allowed, and I'm going to touch on some very bizarre studies at some point. This is probably the top one that I think of. And the main issue as well is the fact that the mother took Albert out of the study because just how damaging it was, and Watson and Rayner were never able to undo the conditioned response. So as far as we know, this little boy grew up to be terrified of white rats and things associated with that because of this study that they decided to do. This, we can all agree, is highly unethical. Yet in the year of 2020 that brought so much bad stuff, Yale thought, why not jump into this and give something bad into the world, because we don't have enough of that. And they called the study Attend Less, Fear More: Elevated Distress to Social Threats in Toddlers with Autism Spectrum Disorder, where they wanted to see how autistic toddlers would react to social threats and also non-social threats. Everything I'm going to be talking about right now I found on the public domain, mostly because I refused to pay Yale $8 for access to the full report because I don't want to give them money that they can then spend on a similar experiment. It is not happening for me. The study looked at 42 kids on the autism spectrum and 22 neurotypical kids who were 22 months old to 23 months old. Also, a little bit of a weird thing is they got the neurotypical kids from a volunteer sample. So they put an advertisement up and people could come and say, yeah, we want to be part of the study, here's our kid. Whereas the autistic kids were referred to by their parents and doctors for diagnostic assessment at the university and then were put into this study. The study obviously used the words participants as well, but I'm just going to call it what it is. They are toddlers, not participants, because when you use participants, you kind of get away from the actual impact of this. Like, no, you're using literal kids in this study, in this very unethical study. I refuse to call them participants. They can't consent. The parents had to consent for them. They are being made to feel frightened for this study. They are kids. Toddlers were exposed to social threats like strangers, non-social threats like mechanical spiders, and ambiguous threats like people wearing masks. And their intensity of distress, attention to the threat, and presence of emotional regulation were measured. A stranger approached a toddler and stared at them for 60 seconds for 3 trials. Then it was a non-social threat, so a mechanical spider for 3 trials would look at them for 60 seconds. And finally there were 3 trials of horror masks being shown. Between these probes, toddlers were given what was called playtime, which lasted between 30 to 75 seconds to help them calm down. 30 seconds is nowhere near enough time for a toddler to process what has just gone on and manage to calm down. Even less so with an autistic toddler, where processing can take a lot longer, so it takes them longer to calm down. I myself am not an autistic toddler, but I still find it incredibly hard to process emotions really quickly. So 30 seconds for even me to calm down does not seem like a long time whatsoever. On paper, to the APA, which is known as the American Psychological Association, which is, as Yale is in America, the study would have to go through to get the green light to be produced. It seems like they addressed any ethical issues the study could have had, i.e. giving them a break to calm down. And in their defense statement, Yale said they were monitoring their responses. But if you actually read the study, it's obvious there wasn't sufficient amount of time between them, and a lot of parents noted the distress from their kids and removed them from the study, yet those same researchers who could see what the parents were seeing and see the distress in these kids didn't take a break or shut the experiment down, they just kept going. This study should not have been allowed to even happen. After all this, do you want to know what they found out? That autistic children show less attention yet enhanced distress to social threats, i.e. a stranger staring at them. This means that they didn't pay attention to the stranger per se, but they were still uncomfortable and fearful of the person, and a lot of distress was shown. They say, and I'm going to quote this, "Poor attention to potential social threat may limit opportunities to assess its threat's value and thus contribute to often observed negative emotional responses to novel social situations." This means that autistic people may pay less attention to social threats, which means they don't process it in the same way that a neurotypical person would, and it could appear to be more of a threat to the autistic person than it actually is. Which, isn't that something we already know? That autistic people often have elevated emotional responses to things that don't affect neurotypical people. This study was meant to mirror what children would experience in the real world. But how often do you think toddlers are going to get approached by mechanical objects or stared at by someone for 60 full seconds with no other interaction going on? What follow-up did they do to make sure these literal kids were okay and not traumatized after this experiment? The fact that parents had to get their kid out of the study shows that there was a level of trauma here. And if you know anything about autistic people, they are more susceptible to trauma as well. So this could really affect their development and how they process things going forward. To me, it doesn't seem like they cared about these kids at all during the study, and they were just guinea pigs. They were just something that could potentially benefit their research. But if we think about the benefits of the study over the cons of doing it, they definitely outweigh the benefits. And if you know anything about conducting the study, if the cons outweigh the benefits, a study should not go forward at all until that is fixed. Nothing good that could have come from this study will ever outweigh the ethical implications of doing it. But what do you think? I want to hear opinions from anyone, autistic or realistic. I just want to hear what you think of this study, because to me it is horrible and disgusting, and from what I've seen, most of the autistic community agree that this wasn't needed. Like, this study did not need to go through, and I cannot understand why Yale did it. Anyway, I got a bit heated in this. I forgot how much this study really does affect me from both a psychological standpoint and a human with moral standpoint. But if you like this video, don't forget to give it a like. Comment down below, as I said, what your thoughts are. And if you like these videos, please subscribe, because I will be talking more about this stuff, as I really do have a passion for psychology and everything to do with it. And I really do want to talk about more studies that have physical impacts today, and more about ADHD and autism and mental health and anything like that I kind of want to talk about, as well as the really unethical, bizarre studies that happened in the past and sometimes do still happen today, like this one. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all soon.